What's up, guys? Welcome back to Country Bunkers Trains, and welcome to part 3 of the O-Gauge layout expansion. In the last video, we left off with actually expanding the layout itself, as well as getting some track thrown up on the table and getting a track plan together. Once again, just as in the last video, it doesn't look like a whole lot has happened since you've last seen the layout. However, it has been quite a busy week this past week, finalizing, tweaking, and securing down the track, which we're going to go over here in a few minutes. It does take quite a bit of work to get this stuff finalized. As I've said in previous videos, and as you guys can obviously see, we went with the MTH Realtrax once again. I get a lot of interest and questions on this track on the channel. I figured today I'd give you some personal thoughts on the track system itself, as well as some observations that I've seen on this track. The Realtrax is MTH's main track system. It comes in starter sets as well as separate sale in the hobby shops or online. MTH does offer another track system called Scale Tracks. However, personally, I've never seen it for sale in the stores or seen it for use on layouts. This seems to be a bit more known or used compared to the Scale Tracks. This stuff does come with quite a bit of mixed reviews. Some people seem to really love it and others seem to hate it. And there's good reasoning on both sides for that, which we're about to go over. Anyways, as you can see, the Realtrax is a sectional track. Its standard sizing for straights is 10 inches long as well as 30 inches long. They also offer these smaller 3.5 inch, 4 inch, 4.5 inch, 5 inch, and 5.5 inch straight sections, which really do come in handy when doing a layout with track work, anything other than just a basic oval. This stuff really, like I say, it really pays for itself. When you get to that final placement or final piece of track, and the space to put that final piece of track is a lot smaller than this 10-inch section, that's where this stuff really comes into play. It's quite helpful. I have found I use the 3.5-inch sections of track the most out of all the smaller pieces. Being a sectional track with plastic roadbed, this stuff doesn't really have a whole lot of give. And that's where them small straights really come into play. Like I say, you can't really make up a difference of distance by trying to bend this stuff because it just wants to come apart. Or if you have it screwed down, you'll get a big crack in the track itself at the joint. So that, like I say, that's where these straights really come into play to help you get that track where it needs to be and everything's nice, straight, and square. The curved sections of Realtrax are offered in 031 all the way up to 082. I have had my hands on all of it except for the 031. I've always just used the old tubular or tin plate track for the 031 curves. For newcomers to the hobby, when you hear that saying 031, 042, all that is referring to is the measurement of the track itself. If you were to take these curves and create a circle by itself, that measurement is from halfway around the circle. You would measure halfway around, or the widest radius of the curve from the center rail to the center rail on the other side, and that's where that comes into play. So 042 would be 42 inches from center rail to center rail. This 072 track would be 72 inches or 6 feet from center rail to center rail at the widest radius of the curve. This stuff's been around for quite a while, and I've actually got one of my original pieces when I first started out 20 years ago. I want to say there's 3 generations now of Realtrax out there. I will say the first generation, or the earlier stuff, seems to be a better build quality or a more premium product, if you will. Here's an old piece. You can see the rails are solid. And then here's a brand new piece, a newer generation. The rails are hollow. This piece weighs a little bit more and just feels like a little bit more quality in this piece than this piece. However, with that said, they do still work together and you can get them to line up. As I was saying earlier, this stuff has a lot of mixed reviews online. A lot of people really like it and a lot of people really don't like it. I'd have to say I've found the key to working with this stuff is patience. You really got to be patient in forming a layout out of this track system. The main issue with this track is the little brass electrical connections or fingers on the bottom of the track. A lot of times these are deformed, bent, and not in the proper orientation. So what I like to do is take a small flathead screwdriver and I'll come in here and get them bent back into the proper orientation and where they should be on both sides. As you can see, this track looks good. I've already done this one. I have found all of my old track that we are reusing to be ready to go, basically, because I had done this previously. However, I did find with all of the new track going on the layout, I had to tinker with that stuff a lot. A lot of the fingers were bent or in the wrong orientation. And as I say, that's the biggest problem, because if them fingers aren't touching, this piece of track, wherever it's bent or not contacting, is not going to have any electricity flowing through it for the trains to run off of. A lot of people also complain about how the track goes together itself. Once you get your fingers together, a lot of people have problems pushing this stuff together and connecting it. I found the easiest and best way to do it is hold them completely horizontal of each other and pushing straight in, and you can see it goes right together. No issues, no problems. Again, this is an older piece of track, so it's a little bit more worn out and a little bit easier, but again, still, that's the easiest way. For disassembling the track, the easiest way to do it is just like that. Bend the rails up in kind of like a V, pull it apart, and you're good to go. Of course, when doing that, you want to make sure all your connections on the bottom aren't getting bent up or hurt. So normally what I do, I'll assemble a few sections of track together. For instance, half of this corner I'll do all together, and then I'll flip it upside down before securing it down or placing it on the layout and inspect all of our connecting points. You can see all of these are making proper connection and look good. As I say, this would have to be the key for this track system, making sure that this is the end result that you're getting. Everything's fitting together properly and you got a good electrical connection. Another common issue that I see with this stuff is obviously all your connections are on the bottom side of the rail itself. You don't really have anything connecting the rails together themselves. They're just kind of free-floating and relying on the clips and connections underneath. One issue I've run into, especially on the newer Realtrax, the hollow-railed stuff, you can see it doesn't really join up perfect right there. See how one's kind of leaning in and one's kind of leaning out? And this is where the patience and time really comes in. After you get all your tracks secured down to the table, or at least for me, I like to go through all the joints and connecting spots on the track. And the way to fix this, I use a pair of needle nose and I gently bend these pieces together so that they're nice and uniform, and we got a nice smooth joint now. This is a very important step. You got to think of this as kind of like doing a paint job on your car or on your house. A paint job is only as good as the prep work that you did before the paint job. You could spend all the money in the world and get the best paint. However, that paint job's still going to turn out looking bad if the proper prep work wasn't performed prior to actually painting whatever it is you're painting. And as I say, you got to think about it the same way with this. Sure, you could get this stuff right out of the box, hook it all together, make your loop, and start running the trains. However, you might run into, as we were speaking earlier, maybe you're going to lose power to the engine on one piece of track somewhere on the layout. Or sometimes you'll see the train bouncing and jumping around on the track due to these joints not being perfectly flush, and the engine might start spitting traction tires and stuff like that. Is it working? Yes. But is it ideal and perfect? Absolutely not. Another issue people seem to have with this track, as we were going over earlier, this is a plastic roadbed, and underneath the track you can see you have these pockets under the track itself. When placed on the table, you've got these open pockets under the track, which causes quite a bit of sound reverb through the plastic roadbed. It can get quite loud in your train room when running a bunch of trains on this stuff, because again, it's just hollow and nothing under it, and there's a lot of reverb coming from sound and whatnot from the trains traveling on the tracks. Again, as I stated in the other video, I think that's where that particle board we spoke about really helps me out. That stuff really helps to deaden the sound and cancel it out. However, I've also seen people take insulation and stuff and glue it into these pockets underneath the track in an effort to help quiet them down. Personally, like I say, I don't have an issue with it, and with my modern engines, I'm never really running them all out, full-blown, full speed. I like to keep them in the 10 to 15 scale mile per hour zone. That's what I enjoy. So with my modern engines, they don't really make a whole lot of noise on the track because they're traveling at such a slow speed. The post-war engines will get a little bit louder on this stuff because, again, it's hollow under there. They do make some bit of sound, but again, like I say, I think that particle board under this grass helps me out quite a bit with that. One of the last items about this track that could be good or bad depending upon how you look at it, the rails themselves are made out of nickel, so they won't rust. However, the magnet traction on the older post-war engines and equipment will not stick to this track, obviously. So if you're running mainly just post-war equipment and you're trying to run longer trains and so on and so forth, this isn't exactly ideal because the engine itself starts slipping and spinning its wheels. But again, when comparing this with fast track, this stuff isn't going to rust. I've heard of a lot of people having issues with fast track rusting and getting corroded and stuff like that, whereas I say that's not going to be an issue with this stuff. For powering the track, you got a couple different ways that you can go about it. From the factory, you have these lock-ons that MTH offers, and on each piece of track you have this little piece that you can take a pair of pliers and break off, and then you have access to your clips underneath to slide your lock-on into, just like that. And that's how you can power your track. Run your wires to this lock-on, and then it works. You can also go about, if you don't want to use the lock-ons, soldering your wires straight to the brass fingers or connections underneath the track. That works well too. However, personally, the kid in me kind of likes the extra lighting effect that these lock-ons give to the layout, so I prefer to use these, and I've had no issues with them. I would suggest, if building a permanent layout or a layout that you know is going to be there for quite a while, to screw the track down to the table itself or the bench work. This stuff, especially the newer track, has a bad habit. I don't have enough pieces here to demonstrate. But on curves, it's kind of bent funny. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but on that second piece back there, it starts to lift up, and then you get a reverse bank on the curves, which isn't exactly ideal for running trains. So I like to screw it down. That way I know it's nice and flat up against the table. Some final thoughts on this stuff. As much as I do like it and do enjoy it, I will say it's not exactly the most aesthetically appealing track system out there. I'll even go so far as to say I actually think the fast track from Lionel looks a bit better than this stuff. This stuff doesn't look bad, and it pulls the look off. Like I say, I'm not a rivet counter or anything like that. However, like I say, it's not necessarily the best looking track system out there. However, the one thing that this stuff does really shine on and blows the tubular track out of the water is the electrical contacts and connections for the track itself. This track does an awesome job of conducting the electricity throughout the layout. Currently on this outer loop, which I'll show you in a minute, I only have 2 lock-ons or 2 feeder wires or power sources powering this track. And hell, to be honest, I don't even need 2. I could get away with just 1. However, it is quite a bit bigger loop, so I do have 2 on it. If I was doing this same loop with tubular track, because that's the only other track system I have used in the past, I'd have to have at least 3 or 4 feeder wires, lock-ons, power sources, whatever you want to call them, to be able to operate that track. You'll notice the post-war engines will run fine next to wherever the power is coming in at, like these lock-ons in the background. However, when it gets over here to the other side of the layout, they start losing power, they start losing momentum, and they slow down quite a bit. Like I say, this stuff really outshines the tubular track in that department. This has no issue or big power drops around the entire perimeter of the track work. But yeah, guys, like I say, patience is definitely key when working with this track system. It's not exactly quite as easy as the old tubular track. And that's what the majority of the time was spent on this last week, getting all of this set up and placed. But I believe we're good to go. I've been doing some testing and the engines are running pretty good on it. And also we got our switches and our sidings installed, looking pretty good. I set these up the same way as I did previously. The sidings are insulated away from the main track work using this electrical tape on the contacts as well as the rails themselves. Not exactly the prettiest alternative, but hey, it works. And we did the same thing back there. I do leave the grounds hooked up or exposed. That way I only got to run a power wire through a switch to turn it on, and it grounds out just as the other track through the track system itself. But yeah, I've got a power and a ground wire soldered to the bottom side of this curve right here that comes over and feeds as the power for the bumpers back there, as well as supplies power to the switches to turn these sidings on. It's a little messy, but you get the idea of it. And as I was saying earlier, the outer loop has two lock-ons or feeder sets, one over there in front of the door and one over here under the shelf. Honestly, I probably could have got away with only doing one, but I figured I'd rather play it safe than sorry, so we got two installed. This is about the halfway point on each side around the loop or perimeter. The inner loops each only have one lock-on. I haven't run into any issues in the past. Like I say, this track does an excellent job of letting the current or power flow through the track itself. No power losses anywhere or anything like that. As you can see, this is a very basic layout, not intricate by any means. Honestly, I think the last expansion we did had a little bit more intricate track plan to it than this one. But that's the price you pay when wanting to run these big radius curves in a small space. Like I say, you can see we don't have a whole lot of room to work with to be able to do some intricate track planning or big curves anywhere else. Yeah, we might have a little bit more room if I got rid of one of the loops. However, personally, I enjoy getting as many trains running on the table as I can. So this is going to have to work. And it'll look a lot better. It won't look so basic or plain once we get some scenery up on the table. Once we have some buildings and trees and whatnot to hide the train in some spots, it won't look near as bland or basic. I did have a couple people mention in the last video that I should bring the tracks closer together to give it more of a 3-track mainline type of look. This is as close as I can comfortably get the tracks together. I was testing it out with the Yellowstone engine, which is a very big engine on this 072 inner loop, and it was overhanging on the curves about here or so. As I say, we've got a big boy coming to the layout here later on this year, and that's, I want to say, another 2 inches longer than that engine. I was even reading online that some of the big boy engines overhang on the curves almost up to 2.5 inches. So I wanted to play it safe if I ever wanted to run that big boy on this inner loop, that we would have no issues anywhere or engines running into each other anywhere on the layout. I also had a lot of comments that I should add some switches to be able to let engines run or trains run between the two outer tracks. And I like the way you guys are thinking. I did keep this in mind, and I've got us set up so that hopefully in the future we can do that with some 072 switches up here in the front, as well as do some back here on this straightaway. I do think it would be cool, and I would, as I say, I'd love to do it in the future. However, it's not really priority at the moment. Mainly, I just let the engines run on their own dedicated loop. But like I say, hopefully in the future this is something we can add on. With the track work out of the way, I was able to get the new control center set up as well. I kind of like how it turned out. I'm digging it. This is where the subway used to be on the layout originally. I was finally able to reuse my shelf, the first one that I made, as that used to be under the subway previously. However, when I did the last expansion, I didn't really have anywhere to put it. I finally got a place to put it once again. It's kind of acting as the legs or the support for the control center itself. That shelf is very, very heavy. I built that all out of 1/8" steel. That thing's got to weigh at least 60, 70 pounds. I was a little reluctant on hanging it on the wall, so it's going to stay on the floor. And like I say, it's got a good home there, acting as the legs for the control center. I did finally do one thing I've been wanting to do for quite a while, and was kind of forced or had to do on this go around. But the layout now has a master switch. It turns the layout on. Isn't that pretty cool? I like it. Like I say, I've been wanting to do that for a while, and kind of had to do it this go around. The outlet for the layout is located basically right under that window, which is halfway under the layout. I'm not crawling under the layout every time to plug it in and unplug it whenever I'm done. So I sacrificed a heavy-duty extension cord from the shop for now, and it's working fairly well. I might do something a little bit more permanent in the future, but this seems to be doing the trick for the moment. Next to our control center are the controls for our sidings. Like I was saying earlier, those sidings are insulated. I don't know if you guys will be able to see it that well on camera with the sunlight. But you can see that turns the cars on. They're getting power now. And of course we got the controls for the switches here as well. Took a little bit. They were a little finicky this go around, but they're working again. Here under the layout is the second part of our control center. You can see I installed a duplex outlet running out to some power strips to power everything. Not exactly the cleanest install, or not as clean as the other layout, but it's a lot better than it was, and we still got a ways to go. Luckily, so far I've been able to recycle and reuse all of the old wiring off of the old layout. However, I'm going to have to get some more from here on out for wiring everything else up. I did get a lot of questions on the wiring as well. I don't go all out. I stick to being basic, to be honest. I just have the power wires from my ZW going on to the ports of the TIU, and then I just have a standard 2 wires going out to the track. I know there's a lot of voodoo and magic that people do with the DCS system, but like I say, for this small of a layout, I don't go all out. I know there's star wiring and, like I say, a whole bunch of voodoo to make this stuff work. But I keep it very basic. I just run it out to the track and that's it. For these outer lock-ons, for this outer loop, I just soldered the wires together to one set of wires going back to the TIU. And that's all I've done. Nothing special. The best thing about all of this is we can finally run some trains again. Woohoo! Makes it much more enjoyable working on the layout when you can actually run some trains on the layout. Gives you something to shoot for. And I've been enjoying it. I've been doing some testing and running various engines on the new 082 loop that we have installed, and all of them love it. They look fantastic negotiating this nice wide curve. I do have an odd one for you guys, or a goofy one if you will. This Daylight is one goofy engine. Like I say, everything loves the new 082 loop except for that particular engine. It does not like the 082 curves. I've had my problems in the past and issues trying to run bigger engines on too tight a radius of curve. And normally what happens, like I say, the curve is too tight, so the engine will flop out towards the outside because the radius is just too much, so it continues trying to go straight. With that Daylight, it does the opposite on these 082s. It kind of climbs the track and goes inward. It does it when it gets to a third section of 082 curves. It has no problem doing 2 of them, but once it reaches that third section of 082 curve, like I say, it tries to climb up and off of it and loses power. It just acts real goofy. I don't know. I don't understand it. Not a big ordeal for me because, like I say, that engine's going to have 3 other loops to run on, but I found it very odd. What makes it even weirder is that engine loves the 054 curves that are here in the middle. It absolutely adores them and runs the best on those curves, and that's the minimum recommended curve for that engine. It doesn't mind the 072 loop here in the middle, and it never had a problem with the 072 before in the past as well. But hell, it even surprised me today. It went right through the curve on this 042 switch with no issue. It blew right through it without a hiccup. And that's a pretty big engine. It's not huge, but it's pretty monstrous. Like I say, it's quite odd. And it only happens whenever it gets to the third section of 082 curves. It does it on all three sides of the layout. That back corner, and this front corner. It doesn't do it over here because I only got two sections of track at a time. But yeah, quite odd. We're pretty much on hold or at a standstill at the moment with the layout expansion. I've got some stuff on order that I'm waiting for it to come in for the new elevated erased loop that'll be getting reinstalled on the layout. I'm pretty excited for the stuff that is coming, some big changes. You guys are going to have to stick around and wait and see what's coming. But yeah, once we get that stuff in and continue on with the raised loop that is getting installed, we can then move on with placing scenery, trees, and stuff like that. I don't want to start placing all of that and then have to move it once that new raised section of track goes in. Just create more headache. So, like I say, we're kind of on hold at the moment. Hopefully that stuff will be in this week or hopefully next week, and we can continue on with the layout expansion. I might place a few things back on the layout temporarily to get a feel for it or an idea of where I might want to place some stuff. We're going to have some big changes coming to the scenery due to the new track plan on this layout. We're not going to be able to reinstall a lot of the stuff that was on it before. We might have to borrow, steal, or swap out some of the buildings and accessories that were on the other layout or the second layout previously and move them over to this layout. But we'll have to see how all of that plays out once all that stuff gets here for the elevated line. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It would be much appreciated. Until next time, guys, my name is Zach, and this is Country Bunkers Trains. Y'all take care. I'll see you the next go-round. And make sure to tune in next time for part 4 of the layout expansion.